Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community. Welcome to the podcast. Now tune in for this episode of our podcast. You're going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, here's your host. Listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. I was talking to Professor Yoni Rainey in Israel. She says, you have to interview my son. He's written some fascinating books about Nazis and Muslims, which people don't really know a lot about. So we're very pleased that historian, researcher Yoni Rainey joins us. He's written 3 books detailing radical Muslims and the Hitler-Nazi connection, which I believe still exists to a certain degree to this day. So, Yoni, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Most people, when they think about Nazis and Muslims and the Holocaust, they think about the Mufti of Jerusalem, but it goes way beyond that, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And unfortunately, in Israel, I'm the only researcher who's dealing with this issue, because most scholars deals only with the issue of the Mufti.
Why is that? Because we're going to talk about how more detailed it was. Why is the Mufti the only one that gets any attention?
I'm not really sure how come he received a lot of attention. I think maybe mostly it's because of the Eichmann trial, that they used this trial to receive from Eichmann himself some details about the Mufti and the Holocaust. But they did not found anything. And if you ask me, I think this is what I believe, is that we should focus more on the Arabs in Palestine at the time and their relationship with the Nazis, which has nothing to do with the Mufti. They had a relationship with the local Germans in Palestine. Of course, when I say Palestine, I'm not talking about the Arab land. Palestine is a name which refers to Eretz Israel.
Palestine before 1948. So let's look at the connection between Nazis and Arabs that lived in Palestine during the World War II, during the Holocaust.
Yeah, but before that, there are some things that I must mention first, because people usually ask that, and this is one of the main questions which I deal with my 3 books, which I dedicated for the relationship of radical Islam and Nazism. First, people mistakenly believe that Hitler, as an anti-Semite, hated all the Semites, which includes the Arabs. Well, in 1935, when they drafted the Nuremberg laws, the racial laws, they said in the protocols in August not to mention not to use the term anti-Semitism, anti-Semestos, rather only anti-Judaism. And they said the Nazi regime is not against the Semites, which is the Muslims and the Arabs, only against Jews. It's stated that way. And later on, Jews were not considered as Semites. Also, in 1936, the chief of the racial office ministry, his name was Professor Walter Gross. He said that Arabs they are allowed to marry Germans, and that's okay. And in 1937, they even published an article in the Volkischer Beobachter, which was the Nazi journal, which states that the Arabs have Aryan blood. And also in 1941, Hitler, in his closed meeting, he also mentioned the Aryan characteristic and blood of the Arabs. So this is one thing that we must understood why the Nazis and the Arabs and the Muslims could cooperate together. And it is also important to mention that most of the documents which I show in my books were taken in a closed meetings, because if it wasn't in a closed meeting, which everyone could hear it, or it's something that published publicly,
knowledge.
then you may, then you may think that he's trying to get the support and attention of the Muslim world. But since this is in a close meeting, this is the reason why this is his actual belief.
Now, I also understand there was a connection between the Arabs, Muslims, and Nazis. In 1935, I don't remember if it was Eichmann or some other leading Nazi actually went to Palestine, and they wanted to transfer Germany to Palestine. Didn't work out, but that was originally their thought as well in 1935.
1937, that's correct, what you said.
Was it Eichmann who went? I think it was Eichmann who went to.
Yeah, it was Adolf Eichmann. And moreover, there were already Germans, Templars, in Palestine, and they received the Nazi propaganda. And also the German ambassador in Palestine, he made a good job in spreading the Nazi propaganda through. Well, what they tried to do is also to reach the Arabs. They had a very close connection with the Templars. Also, the Mein Kampf was translated. This is very interesting because they the way they showed,
was the Mein Kampf translated into Arabic?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because they explained to the Muslims that jihad is it's some sort of a personal war that a man have with himself, struggle, and Mein Kampf, it's my struggle, my war. And they try to convince them that Hitler is talking about jihad. And Hitler, for the Muslim world, he was almost like Prophet Muhammad.
They revere Hitler in the Muslim world?
Yeah, they were saluting,
Please, it was which countries did they salute Hitler? Did they worship Hitler?
Palestine, Iraq, and some places even in North Africa. In Egypt, well, the British, they tried probably successfully managed to prevent most of the Nazi propaganda in Egypt, but in most of the Muslim world, they were pro Hitler. This is, well, there's something really interesting that a famous British officer, his name was Glab Pasha, John Bagot. He was very close to the Arabs, and in 1938, reported, I have the report in my book, that the Arabs in Palestine are gaining nationalism which is based on the Nazi regime. That is, Nazism, it's the thing that combined all the Arabs into one local nationality. This is not something that you can understand very easy if you're from the West, because if you look until the First World War, the Arabs, or these Arab-speaking people, which many of them were not necessarily were Arabs, they were Muslims, but they spoke Arabic. And this is the very interesting, because they explained to the Muslims that if you see from all over the place of, it's called Greater Syria or Balad Hasham, this is the Levant, in every village was like a national home for each group. That is, it was like a country. They even used to fight themselves. There was no unique Arab and nationality all over the place. That is, also, there was never a Palestinian nationality. Also during the 20s, the vast majority of the Arabs, about 20%, were pro-Zionist, and they were against the Mufti. The British decided they want to put the Mufti to appoint him as the ruler of all the Arabs.
That was Sir Herbert Samuel. The Mufti came in last, I believe. They had a vote, and despite that, somebody who was more pro-Israel, pro-Jewish won the popular vote. Sir Herbert Samuel decided to put the Mufti in a position of power.
Yeah, but we're not talking here about vote. It's just the British Herbert Samuel, who was Jewish, he was listening to anti-Semites.
I think 5 candidates were vying for the position, and the one who had the most support was pro-Israel, pro-Jewish, but Sir Herbert Samuel decided to go with the Mufti, who had the least amount of support.
Yeah, even you can see the letters. You can see also the letters that the Arabs in Palestine sent, not only to the British, but also to the League of Nations, which I quote in my books. But you know, when you are holding the education system, then you can target the young teenagers. Also, you must take into account that most of the Arabs, they were considered already as very old people in about the age of 45. They did not live for very long at the time. Jews, on the other hand, could live over age of 65. So you can see that you had a new generation already in the 30s. And when Hitler became the chancellor the ruler of Germany at the time, already his propagandists started to contact the different Arab leaders here. And you know, even Arabs here had this swastika, and they used to go to visit with other students in Germany, where they learned more about the Nazism. This is the first time when the Arabs had, let's say, symbols and one leader that they could even pray for. And this was very important to combine them together from separated clans, Hamula, to some sort of a group with ideology.
So you're saying Nazism was the glue that bound them together as a nationality?
Yeah, and by the way, this is not me saying it. Of course, I'm proving it in my books, but to support it, all the procedure which I show, I brought in the what I said, the report of Glab Pasha in November of 1938.
Our guest is Yoni Rainey. He's a historian, researcher, written 3 books about the connection between Muslims, not just the Mufti of Jerusalem, Muslims and Nazism and Adolf Hitler. Now, in 1940-41 to Farhud, there was a pogrom in Iraq. Was that related to this Nazi activity among the Muslims?
Well, yeah, but before that, I want to appoint, for example, another attack on Jewish civilians at the time in Iraq, like in 1936, which was when it was in Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. So this, and by the way, 1936, at the time, the Nazis supported the Arabs in Palestine when there was the great Arab revolt.
So how did they support them? Did they support them militarily, money-wise? What do you mean that?
Yeah, mostly money, as you can see in the documents. I want to talk about the Farhud of 1941. The reason that everybody knows about it is because at the time the Mufti went to Iraq. This Farhud was already planned, and he just came there. But this is the only reason that people knows only about the Farhud. Because I'm dealing in a much expanded field, I found out that there were more attacks on Jews, not because of the Mufti, but totally because of Nazi propaganda.
Now, how did Adolf Hitler and the Nazis view the religion of Islam?
Okay, this is really interesting because there was a war. It's called the Kirchenkampf, a war against the Christianity already in during the 30s. But this is really interesting because in this book I have all the protocols from Hitler's meeting in German language, which I translated, and also the interviews with the close members, like his sister-in-law Elsa Braun and Albert Speer. He always condemned Christianity. He said that because of Christianity, it has a lot of tolerance, and it's accepted the others. It's a peaceful religion, and this is what prevents the Germanic tribes to take over the world. And he said, if we had Islam, we could rule the world. And not only that, already during the 30s, via media, the newspapers, they tried to convince and encourage Germans to convert into Islam. And by 1938, about 2,000 Germans in Berlin converted into Islam.
Why the Nazis wanted people to convert to Islam?
Yeah, it's amazing how even Hitler's one of his statements was he was very angry that Karl Martel defeated the Arabs, because he said if the Arabs won the war, then the Germans could receive Islam. By the way, even Himmler was a big fan of Islam, and I think he was more radical than Hitler at that point. He also mentioned another case of the great Solomon, who fought Austria in 1683, and he said if he could win, then we could get the religion which is close to us. But take a look, this is a very ironic thing. If you look at the Islamization of Europe today, those who promote the Islamization of Europe, they have the very radical progressive views. They claim that they do it because they have a lot of tolerance, and they need to.
They say it's a religion of peace.
Yeah, and accept the others. You see, it's exactly the opposite of what Hitler stated, but eventually they are applying his vision and what he wanted to happen in Europe.
Here's what you're saying and alleging is that Hitler was more comfortable with Europe becoming and Germany becoming more Islamic than Christian or Jewish.
Yeah, for an instant, not only his quotes, they had Muslim units called, one of them called the Khanjar 13, means the sword division. They were so brutal that even the other SS were feared from them. If you read in my book, I also show some documents about their actions. They did things that I'm not going to say it here, but if you read it without knowing about what you're reading about, you might think that I'm describing the 7th of October. They were so brutal with what they did with bodies, and even during when they were alive, that when they reported it to Hitler, Hitler said, okay, so what the big deal? It's like this is exactly what they should do. This is exactly what the good.
But people think that Hamas invented it on October 7th, but it's not only what you pointed out. In 1929, in Hebron, if you read a description of the massacre, the burning of the babies, the killings, you would think it was October 7th, the brutality. For some reason, it's in the blood of these radical Islamists where they just not only kill, but they torture in such a barbaric way.
Moreover to what you've just mentioned, I have an article which describes the terrorist attack on Jews in Israel from the early 50s till 1967. Because many, as you remember, the head of the UN said that that it did not happen in vacuum, that because of they're under occupation, then this is the reason that the frustration make them like that. But from the 50s, from 1949 till 1967, Israel did not have any. They did not hold these areas, and yet you see the terrorist attacks, and there were no different than what they did in Tarpat, which you've mentioned, and also in October 7. This is some sort of a part of the radical Islamic culture to brutalize your enemy.
Now, what other matter? Let's talk about the Mufti and Hitler, because that got the most attention. When you think of the Muslim Nazi connection, people think of the Mufti of Jerusalem. So let's look at how close he was to Hitler and what that meant in the Middle East, having the Mufti and the Nazis all on the same page.
Well, before that, this is very important. Before we talk to the Mufti, because this is the least important issue in this whole field, I would like to point out a few things about the Arabs in Palestine. Because if you read the pro-Palestinian propaganda, they even Arab scholars condemn the Mufti. And you read that according to them, the pro-Zionist propaganda mentions the Mufti because they are trying through him to condemn all the Arabs, even though, according to what they claim, they did not went with Hitler. They were different from the Mufti, and there was also so-called research by in the past years by an Arab scholar. His name is Mustafa Abbasi. Professor Abbasi claimed that 12,000 Arabs in Palestine joined the British forces and fought with the Jews against the Nazis. Now, in my book, I have the actual report about these 12,000, and I showed this report to Brenner Yemini, who wrote an article about it, and it states that 50% of those 12,000 deserted to the Nazi army. And it does not include those who try to establish here some undergrounds that were waiting for Rommel to come, so they have a fifth column. And not only this is not only that they joined the Nazi, they used the British military training for that. Listen to this one. I also show a poll from 1941, which shows that about 88% Palestine Arabs were pro-Nazis.
Wow. 88%.
Now we
Nazis.
yeah, they even still until today they have a Mein Kampf in they teach even Mein Kampf. Just recently in about 6 months ago we found a Mein Kampf in Gaza.
So the Nazi ideology. Do we have any numbers of how many Muslims were part of the Nazi army?
I don't remember exactly the numbers, although I did mention the numbers of those who joined the German forces, but there is a little bit problem. Okay, I will say it this way. The real number of Palestinians that joined that went to receive British training is 9,046. According to the British archive. But from that number, only about 2,000 remained in the British army, but they did it only because of economical reasons. They had the economy was very hard on the Arab during the war. So let's say it's about almost 80% of the Arabs who joined the British forces, who joined the 50% of them joined the German forces, and others established the undergrounds, as I mentioned. So
1946 was after the war was over. You had to be told before 46. What years are we looking at?
No, we're talking about 1942 till 1945. But in 1945, when the Arabs figured out that the Germans are about to lose, then many of them defected again to the side of the British.
Yoni is a historian. He's a researcher, written 3 books about the Nazi Muslim connection. The books are in Hebrew. Are they going to be available in English?
Well, they were written in Hebrew, of course, and because the problem is that many of this material is not something that you learn in school in Israel. This is very unfortunate, and this is why I'm trying to head the Israeli, first of all, to the Israeli audience, because if we don't know our history, then we cannot talk, for example, to address Jewish communities in the United States. Many other researchers used to publish the books in English, but it did not reach the Israeli population. So, of course, I will be glad if there is someone among the American Jews or any Jews in outside that have can fund the translation. This is or finding like the right translator and the right establisher, the right publisher that can support me to address not only Jewish Americans but also other Americans.
Historian, researcher, thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back and keep on keeping up, getting the word out about the radical Islam and the Nazi connection. Thank you.
Yeah. See you.
Thank you.
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Terrific. Thank you for being on the air today.
Are we offline?